Be-do-do-do-do-be-do-do-boo. Welcome to the World Wanderers podcast with your hosts Amanda Kingsmith and Ryan Ferguson. Now here's the World Wanderers. Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Amanda and Ryan here. We'd like some feedback on our new intro.
Yeah, we paid $4,500 to a Indian-based intro maker to create that for us. So I'd love to hear what you think. What are we talking about today?
We are talking about Vietnam. Crowd goes wild once again.
We need to get some sound effects.
Yeah, I think so. Really take it to the next level as podcast hosts.
Yeah, so a while ago we did an episode on Cambodia.
I think episode
70 episodes ago.
I think episode 14. You should go check it out though. It's a good one.
Yeah.
Talk about lots of cool stuff.
Shout out.
When we were in Southeast Asia, we traveled Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Laos. And we've done episodes on all those destinations outside of Vietnam. And so we've had quite a few listeners who are traveling in Southeast Asia, and they've asked, did you go to Vietnam? So answer to that is yes, we did. And here's the episode on it. Now I have to put it as explicit. So yes, we went to Vietnam. I don't know if there's any particular reason why we haven't done an episode on Vietnam.
I think we just got distracted from finishing our series on Southeast Asia. So we left Phnom Penh by bus.
Yes. That was
headed on to Ho Chi Minh City.
Yeah, Ho Chi Minh City, or Saigon as they call it, which is kind of a weird thing that we might get into in a little bit. But what was that busing experience like?
So I sometimes conflate, ding, big word, the bus into Phnom Penh, which was crazy. You can find out more about that on our Cambodia episode, I hope. It was a rainstorm, monsoon, death machine. And our bus from Phnom Penh to Ho Chi Minh, which was all right, except for a border crossing, which involved Amanda's soggy passport.
Yeah, totally.
So what happened with the soggy passport?
So it was really humid when we were in Cambodia. Southeast Asia is just hot in general. And we went in rainy season, which is 110% humidity every day. It doesn't actually rain that much. It kind of just really dumps down rain, buckets of rain for half an hour each day, I'd say. But so we were carrying our passports around on us because we were really paranoid about people stealing them in our hostels, which, do your research. I'm not sure. Southeast Asia's grown hugely in tourism, so I'm not sure if that's still a pretty legitimate concern, but it was a bit of a concern at the time. And so I walked around with it in this little pouch on my back the whole time we explored the temples of Angkor Wat, or temples of Angkor, and pulled it out one day. It'd been in a bag, and it was just kind of moist is the best word to use. And part of my visa stamp had actually ran. So I was a little bit hopefully I can get out of this country. This is a bit sketchy. And yeah, they were a little bit hesitant, hey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everyone off the bus got all their things pulled off, and the driver or the guide had taken all of everyone's passports, and then they were kind of getting handed back to us as if we were being picked for a team in a gymnasium. Oh, here you go. You get to go through the border. And then you were kind of I think one of the last people to come through, get their passports back. So I remember feeling a bit stressed about that.
Yeah, definitely. I was quite stressed about that. And it's kind of interesting because since then I've gotten a new passport because I didn't want to travel with my soggy sort of passport. It dried obviously, but when paper gets wet and it kind of dries a little wrinkly, mm-hmm. That's how my passport dried. And so I actually ended up going in and getting a new passport early, and I had to really kind of beg and plead with the person who took my passport, because you're not actually supposed to be allowed to keep a damaged passport. They're supposed to take it from you and destroy it. And person kind of looked at it and was you have a lot of experiences in this. Do you want to keep it? And I was please, can I please keep it? And so, yes, I still have that passport, to make the long story short, but I no longer use it. So good advice for people traveling in Southeast Asia is to get something that's waterproof for sure. waterproof passport holder. And so getting into Vietnam, what was that experience like?
So we had been in Bangkok not too long before, but there's a pretty drastic shift between Phnom Penh and Ho Chi Minh, which is definitely the most commercial, thriving city in Vietnam. So you start to see skyscrapers, and one of the big changes is there's just people on mopeds everywhere.
Yeah.
As if there had been some sort of, I don't know,
like
something crazy happened.
Like
and everyone,
biker gang everywhere.
Like a lottery where everyone in the country won a moped. I think the actual reason is that Vietnam has some crazy rules about owning a car. So everyone on there everyone's driving mopeds except for the occasional car.
I feel like you don't own a car though unless you've actually got like a reason to own a car, like if you're a taxi service or a tour service or something like that.
If you just have, I think, a lot of money, then you can get a car. But I think they just make them really expensive compared to how cheap a moped is.
Yeah, I remember like my first memory of driving into Ho Chi Minh City is sitting like in the window seat on this bus and just being like, oh my God, there's so many motorbikes. Like I remember just snapping photos because I'd never seen so many motorbikes in my whole life.
Yeah, just every side of the bus is just surrounded by tons of people on motorbikes.
Yeah.
So getting in, that was kind of like the first thing you notice, just the buzz of everyone moving around.
There's a lot of energy.
Horns like crazy.
Yeah.
Because people don't use horns like they do in North America where you honk when someone kind of cuts you off. It's just like, beep, 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 like just letting people know where you are using horns.
Yeah, because there's not really like street lights or like traffic. I don't know if there's traffic rules, but it seems like they kind of have their own sort of like traffic, I guess, maybe rules is the word, but it seems like the horns are a really big part of that. It's kind of like beep beep, like I'm on your left, I'm coming around you. Like, oh, beep beep, like I'm on your right, I'm coming. Oh, beep beep, like you need to go. It's just constant. The sounds are constant.
And we had only gotten a 15-day visa to do Vietnam, which is definitely shorter than we would have liked to do, but we were kind of in a rush. I mean, it's kind of funny to be like, 15 days. For some people, that's short. For some people, that's long.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, if you look on a map, Vietnam is like this really long, skinny country that's sort of like, I mean, it's the east side of Southeast Asia, borders with like Cambodia and Laos. Does it border Thailand as well?
No.
It runs from like south to north though on the east side of it. So it's really long and skinny and it takes a long time to get from south to north. So, I mean, 15 days sounds like a long time, but when you're doing only road transportation, it's actually like not that long of time. But
and so I remember.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Hop on, hop off bus tour, which is, I think, a common way for people to do it. You can buy a bus that goes from. You can buy a ticket for a bus that goes from Saigon or Ho Chi Minh, to Hanoi.
Same, but different.
And with stops in X cities along the way, some of the popular places, and then you can just choose. You just show up when you're like, okay, I'm going to go on this day and hit these different spots.
Yeah, it's definitely like a good deal. It's a good thing to do.
Yeah,
I think.
So the really popular things for backpackers to do are that, or a lot of people kind of inspired by Top Gear. Like to
Top Gear, just inspiring young nomad travelers.
Young 20 to 30-year-old males, definitely inspired by Top Gear, hopping on mopeds and motorcycles and doing that trip by bike.
Yeah, which is pretty crazy. Like, I remember getting off the bus and I really liked Ho Chi Minh City. Like, my first impressions of it were like, wow, the city's like really alive. There's so much going on. I remember walking around and just feeling like...
It's like buzzing. Yeah,
it was buzzing. There was a lot of energy. Like, I felt excited to be there. Our hostel we were staying at was cool. We like met some people there, which was awesome. Because our trip had been like a little bit lonely up until that point.
And especially our time in Cambodia, which was... we were able to see some amazing things, but it was kind of emotionally heavy because of how how much poverty there is in that country.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we talk about Cambodia in our Cambodia episode, obviously. And then we also address Cambodia in, I think it's episode 48 on the morality of dark tourism. And so Cambodia was definitely, I mean, it was the poorest place I'd been at that point.
I think ever.
Yeah,
Still,
I think yeah, close with Bolivia. But I think, yeah, Cambodia is probably, I think their history is a little bit more tragic than Bolivia's is, as far as I know. But yeah, there's just a lot of sadness that kind of washes over that country. So it was really nice to get to the city where it was just like, it felt really alive. And, you know, obviously Vietnam with the Vietnam War has gone through quite a bit of history as well, but just felt so much more kind of like almost like funky, like there's just a lot happening. And going outside was really interesting, though. I remember the first time we crossed a street, and like I was saying before, there's no street lights. So, you know, in North America, you're used to having a little pedestrian sign that blinks at you and you're safe to cross the street. That's not a thing in Vietnam. Like, you just cross. Because if you want to wait for the motorbikes to end, you'll stand at that corner probably until you're like 85.
Mm-hmm. So how do people get across the street?
You just step and you just walk continuously. So the key is not to stop or be frightened and not to run. So you just walk at a constant pace. The bikes are used to that. So they see you from a ways away and they're planning their route either on your right or your left. They'll kind of like honk to like let you know where they're at. And you just, I don't know, you got to have a certain like level of faith that you're going to be okay and like trust the system. And I remember the first time we did it, I stood on your right side. So I wasn't like the closest one to the motorbikes. And then I think we even waited till there was a local and walked like across with them.
Mm-hmm. And so if there's multiple people crossing the street, they all go shoulder to shoulder. So you form like as if you were like a stick in a stream. And it's really, that's like the best analogy for how you walk across the water. It's like kind of like we were walking through or walk across the street. It's like kind of as if you were walking across a river and the water parts and goes around you. That's like kind of all these thousands of motorbikes just like part and go around you as you just make your way across the street. And
yeah, I mean, it was terrifying the first time.
Yeah, but it became very nice after a few days when you get used to it because you never have to wait.
Yeah, I remember going from Southeast Asia to Australia, and we'd been like so accustomed to this sort of like, yeah, you just like walk when there's either no cars or you kind of just walk and cars go around you. And I remember we actually walked on the cars at a green light, and this car like laid on its horn at us, like kind of gave us the like hands up, like, what the fuck are you doing type thing. And I just remember us being like, oh, right. Like, we can't just walk across the street. Like, this is like a civilized country with rules. But I actually really...
but I don't... so that's the thing, like, I remember before we went to Southeast Asia, I'd read, I think maybe in like Our Lonely Planet, there's like this analogy to people move and crowds move in Asia in more like water. It's like the flow of water. Like, when instead of stop, go, like everything is over here where you show up at, you know, you're going into like a 7-Eleven or something, and there's someone coming out, so you stop and let them out, or they stop and let you in. In Asia, you just both go, and you just both kind of find your way around people. And same thing with like lines, you're not like stopping and ordering, you just kind of, you know.
It's just like this constant flow.
It's not anything rude, it's just how people do it. And it's the same thing with traffic, it's just a flow, and people figure it out. They'll take the space they can get, but it's not stop, go.
I remember like really becoming used to it and really liking it and feeling so like, why am I waiting at this light? Like, why can I get a ticket if I cross here, even though it's like totally safe for me to cross if, you know, I check and there's no cars? I guess the thing for me that kind of makes me sort of like, I guess, believe in stoplights is the difference in like vehicles. So the idea of being hit by a moped is so much like less intimidating to me than being hit by like a Ford like 4-wheel drive jacked up truck, because like you're dead at that point, right? Whereas like a moped, you're probably like injured if you get hit by that thing, but you're probably not dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it is an interesting example of, instead of having these kind of like top-down rules, like, oh, we got to put lights here and here and stop and go. It's just like everyone's going out doing their own thing, and it does result in a kind of order that's happening that's very like kind of like anarchic.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think about, you know, I think there's a certain level of like some people in North America believe that like other countries that are less developed really like need our help. Like, okay, we figured shit out in North America. Like, let us come and help you. Like, let us give you our ways. And I think like prior to traveling, I was kind of like, I don't understand how like people in other countries, you know, function or work. Like, we've clearly got all the answers over here. Like, you know, we're richer, we're more developed, and like, you know, so in a lot of ways, like, yes, we are. But then there's also things when you travel, you realize, you know, like North America, like, get out, like, stop trying to influence these people because like they're functioning fine in so many ways. Like, Vietnam would be so different if somebody came in and was like, okay, we got to like put up these stoplights and we got to like obey this stuff and we got to do this thing. Right? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know, maybe it would be more safe in a way, but I don't really know. Like, it doesn't seem like people have issues with the way it happens now.
Then to just specifically talking about traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, you see so many crazy things. Like, you see families that are packed on these little mopeds. Like, moms have their babies just like, they're just holding them. Maybe there's like a pig on the back. Like,
that was more of a Cambodian style.
A little bit of that happened in Vietnam though. And like, I mean, I don't know the statistics on death there, but it seems like a bit unsafe. But at the same time, like, if it's working for them, why make them change?
Yeah.
Who's to say that as like a white person, we know what's going on?
So what else was kind of striking about being in Vietnam?
I really liked the food. Vietnamese food was definitely a highlight for me.
But as far as like first impressions or first, like, you're there, the differences between Cambodia?
More development. The traffic was definitely different.
Facebook?
Oh yeah, Facebook. I totally forgot about that. So Vietnam is a communist country, so they're not allowed to have Facebook, I guess, kind of the same way China is.
Well,
but
they're just, yeah.
I don't really know exactly.
They're just kind of more like totalitarian in that respect. They censor and really attack dissent within the country.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. Like, I was sort of prepared to just not really have much like social media contact when we were there. But then all the hostels and stuff we stayed in have these computers that you can go on, and it actually like reroutes the IP address. And so it's kind of funny the first few times I like go on Facebook, and then so I go on Facebook, I get on, I like check my Facebook or whatever, and then I go off. Next time I sign in, it's like, oh, we recommend you changing your password. Somebody signed in from your account in Holland. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, this is weird. So I'm like immediately panicked, kind of freaked out. Somebody in Holland is like hacking my account. Like, I don't know what they're going to post, change my password. And then, you know, the next time I go on, I get the same thing. And I'm like, this is really weird. Like, why is this still happening? And then I clue in that, oh, right, Vietnam doesn't have Facebook, so like these hostels are rerouting the IP addresses and they're rerouting them to Holland. So obviously Facebook is like identifying me as being in Asia, but then they're like, somebody's signing you in from Holland. Like, that's kind of freaky. And so after changing my password twice, I kind of clued into what was going on, and that this mysterious person signing in from Holland was actually me in Vietnam. But
yeah, it's pretty amazing how you can do that so easily.
Yeah, it was interesting though, because like I had my iPad with me and I couldn't get onto Facebook on my iPad because my iPad obviously wasn't set up to like reroute my IP address, but the computers there were. So yeah, just really interesting. It was my first experience somewhere like that. So,
and so what are some of the things that we did in Ho Chi Minh?
Ho Chi Minh City. We went to the Cu Chi tunnels. You want to talk about that experience? That was a bit of a unique one for us.
Yeah, so the Cu Chi tunnels are a bunch of tunnels.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought they might have been caves.
Ironic if they weren't tunnels. I guess it's an area where there's a lot of fighting going on between the Americans and the Vietnamese communists. And so the Vietnamese communists were using these tunnels to kind of hide out and escape bombing. And then there was also a lot of like traps they planted. And yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's this pretty like popular tourist attraction. Like, you know, we show up at our hostel, we're like, what things should we do? And it's like, oh, you have to see the Cu Chi tunnels. Like, that's a really important piece of history here in Ho Chi Minh City. And
it's a ways out of Ho Chi Minh.
Yeah, like they drive you a couple hours out, and then it's interesting because they tell you like stay on the path, stay on the routes, only go in the tunnels that like we've allowed for you to go in, because I guess there's like a lot of like landmines still in like the Vietnamese countryside. And that's kind of something that is consistent throughout the whole country. It seems like there's still a lot of like landmines planted. And that was my first experience. Like I don't have, you know, obviously I've never like experienced like a war. So I was kind of like, whoa, is that actually a thing? Like war is something from a social studies textbook or from a movie or from a book. Like it's not a real thing in my life. So that was a pretty like crazy experience to me, because they tell you so nonchalantly, like, oh yeah, don't like wander off the path. Like there might be landmines out there. Like what?
Yeah. And you're also struck with, in Vietnam, a lot of people, I think maybe kids, a lot of people who are injured from mines and from like Agent Orange, and people who have deformities from all these horrible things that did happen there in the
yeah it's a pretty shocking thing. Like you'll just be walking on the street and you'll see these people who are, their bodies are quite mutilated sometimes, like they're missing quite a few limbs, and you know sometimes there's been like destruction to their faces. Like it's very sad to see, and you know they're living on the streets and they're quite poor. So it is, I mean, Vietnam still has like this tragic history, and it still evokes like an emotional response in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
The Cu Chi tunnels was kind of crazy though, because I mean, obviously when you learn about a war in school, I feel like you learn sort of one side of it. So, you know, for the most part as Canadians, we learned sort of like the Canadian side of war history. And I guess we got some like American influence. It's very interesting learning it from like the Vietnamese side.
Yeah. And from the Canadian perspective, like the things we learned about the Vietnam War, at least through the public school system, were fairly pro-American.
Yeah.
It wasn't really like condemning America for being over there or anything like that. It was kind of just like, oh, this is that thing that happened.
Yeah. And then going over to Vietnam, it's like quite different. Like it's very much like, you know, these like innocent Vietnamese people were living their lives, and, you know, the Americans came over and started bombing them, and they had to like figure out ways to defend themselves.
Yeah. It was my first experience being on the other side to really experience propaganda from a different angle. To see, we got
it a bit in Europe, but like not as extreme. I think there's a bit of that in Europe.
What do you mean? Like
in terms of when you go to like, say, I mean, like even like England, Ireland, they kind of all present, like Germany, they kind of all present the war from sort of like their side. But Vietnam is definitely like the most extreme in terms of like sort of propaganda.
Yeah. It's like, but it's different. Like you get, so I don't mean just like a different angle, like where things might be a different, you go to a different country and go to a historical site and you learn a couple new things, but it's like from the completely opposite direction. Like,
yeah.
There's things talking about how, like, you know, there's people out here farming in this area, and the imperialist Americans came over and started bombing these civilians.
Yeah.
And then
that's a good point.
These heroic people kind of rose up to fight the Americans. I think was one, I remember reading that on one of the things, and you watch this movie that's like very clearly like propaganda that direction too. But it does, like, although you can recognize that it's heavily biased from that direction, it also makes you question the direction you had perceived it from before.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting to consider both sides and kind of like to form your own opinion about it. And I know we talked about it in the history section of the 4 things that you can learn better abroad than in schools. History was one of them. And I think this is a great example of when you can really be like, okay, this is what like the public school system taught me in Canada, and this is what, you know, Vietnam wants me to think. And like, I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. I don't think that anyone, like, you know, it takes 2 to tango. So
yeah, I mean, I think that perspective, like the communist run tourist attraction, is more heavily propagandized than the view you get over here.
Yeah, a little bit, I think.
So at the Coochie tunnels, you get to go down into these tunnels, and there's multiple levels. So the first level is kind of like a tunnel that you're like kind of comfortable with.
Kind of. It's like really small.
Yeah, but then as you go down farther, they get progressively smaller, and it is crazy to imagine what that would have been like to be kind of jammed into these tunnels as there's like bombs going off, or in the middle of fighting, or down there for a long period of time would be terrifying.
I mean, the thought of that just kind of made me dizzy, actually, to be honest. But yeah, I didn't really like being in the tunnels at all. So it's pretty crazy to think that people were like in there for long periods of time, because we just crawled through like quite quickly. And I remember getting out and being like, thank God I'm like not in that anymore. Mm-hmm. But one of the neat sort of aspects of being at the Coochie tunnels was that we were able to shoot AK-47s, which is like pretty crazy.
It's just like, yeah, you're now come take a tour of the tunnels. We've got a gun range here, so you can shoot your favorite weapons. Yeah.
And it's like very, I don't know, it's very casual, I guess. Like you just kind of pay an extra fee, get in line. They like, you know, shove some ear protector things, so like some headphones, I guess, like noise canceling earmuff things on your head. And then they like toss a gun and they're like, okay, yeah, pull the trigger. And I'd never shot a gun before. That was the first gun I'd ever shot. So like the pushback on my shoulder was like a pretty crazy experience for me. And I just pulled the trigger and like, I just shot them all at once. I remember Ryan was like, whoa, did you even like take a moment to take in that experience? And I didn't really, I just held the trigger down and it just was shooting. And I was just like, whoa, I'm shooting a gun. And then it was over and I'd shot like 10 bullets. But yeah, it was pretty crazy. How did you feel about that experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. We had come from Phnom Penh before that, or one of the things to do in Phnom Penh, depending on your interests, is you can go off to gun ranges where you can do things like shoot rocket launchers at propane tanks. And
can't you like shoot cows and stuff too?
There's like a rumor that you can shoot animals with the guns at this gun range, which is I don't feel great about. But so going to the Coochie tunnels was kind of like, oh, this is an interesting opportunity to shoot an AK-47. Mm-hmm. It's funny though, we get down, they give you, like, there's two of us, so we've got like one, you go down to the area where the guy with the gun is, and you've got like one set of earmuffs. So I just remember standing there as you went, and it just being like so loud.
Yeah.
My ears were just hurting so much. And then, you get up there, you're like, ding, 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 ding.
You went a little slower than I did, I think. But yeah, that's what I remember too is, well, I mean, like my whole body was kind of like buzzing and shaking. I feel like I was like kind of in shock from this gun shooting experience that I had when you went, that I just kind of like plugged my ears and just stood there and like watched it happen. I actually don't really remember much of you actually shooting the gun, other than you shot it much slower than I did. Mm-hmm. But so that was that experience. And then we had like a completely opposing experience in Vietnam, where we went and toured the Mekong Delta. And that was kind of an interesting experience because we spent like most of the day kind of on the boat. We got to see sort of, you know, the local Vietnamese people with their boats full of like fruit or vegetables or whatever. And it seems like they were taking them to different like ports and giving them to restaurants or other people and doing some form of trade, I think. But we kind of spent the day just sort of cruising on the river. It was nice and relaxing and sort of great to get outside of the noise of the city. The constant honking kind of like gets old really fast. So after a few days in Ho Chi Minh City, it was nice to have a bit of a more relaxing experience.
And I remember feeling on both of those bus tours just a little bit like, I don't know, a bit weird, because you make stops along the way and they're like, oh, this is like an authentic textile factory. Or,
oh yeah, I forgot about that.
This is an authentic market. And you go to a restaurant, or, you know, they take you on this trip up the river to stop at this one restaurant. And there's just this feeling of like, kind of like in authenticity the entire time. Maybe not the entire time, a lot of the time. Especially too when you know like this place isn't really, it only really operates for this like tour to come through it, or like, you know, these people are like posing as working here, but it's just because tours are continuing to come through.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't really, I guess, like feel that way at the time. I think it was in South America that I really kind of connected with this, like, you know, the difference in authenticity between exploring on your own and finding your own places versus going on tours. Like, I think that's when I was really like, oh, like light bulb went on, like, oh, these places kind of exist for the purpose of tourism.
Which I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, I was just going to say, I mean,
like, I think I would rather pretend to be working in a textile factory in Vietnam than working in one. But I think
the food situation is what like I'd way rather go to a restaurant that's set up for tourism, is like quote unquote authentic, than to go to like an authentic restaurant where they like use the water from the river to like wash your food and stuff. You disagree?
I think that the kind of restaurants you go to where it's just for a tour aren't like typically as good as the ones where they're actually like, you know, depending on people coming back and customers actually liking the food. Yeah,
no, that's a good point. I guess there was a certain level of like, okay, if this is designed for these tours, there's like less of a chance that I'm going to get ill from this food.
But yeah, that might not be true though.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. So from Ho Chi Minh City, we made our way. We began the epic journey north. Do you want to sort of talk about what that was like?
So we had already bought our bus ticket from Ho Chi Minh to Hanoi.
Yeah, the hop-on, hop-off bus.
So our first trip was an overnight bus to Mune, which is kind of like a beach resort destination. And we had never taken an overnight bus before. We did like one overnight train before that. And
which was a terrible experience.
Yeah. So the buses in Southeast Asia are kind of weird. The overnight ones. In South America, you get these kind of like double-decker buses with like nice seats. In Southeast Asia, you get these seats are double-decker. The bus isn't. So it's kind of like bunk beds. It's like bunk seats, kind of.
With like cubbies for your feet.
Yeah. So you walk onto the bus. There's a middle bunk row. There's a side, and there's one on each side. And then at the back, there's no aisle. So it's just 5 seats across each other. And you're kind of in a seat that'll recline most of the way. But down where your feet are, it's kind of like a compartment that's probably like, I don't know, maybe like 10 inches tall and like 1.5 feet wide. So you sit in there and it kind of creates a problem for me because I've got big feet. So my feet can't stay up straight. But then if I turn my feet to the side, my legs hit the edge.
Yeah. So like just to give context, like you're 6'1", so you're like much taller than the average Asian person. And you've got size 12 feet. So your feet are like twice the size of the average Asian person's. So these bunks are just like not designed for your physicality at all.
So yeah, I think we went into the very back because there wasn't anyone there at the time, and we were like, oh, this is gonna be sweet. We got 5 seats beside each other. It'll be awesome because like there's no one else on this bus. And the first time we went, it kind of worked out all right for us in the back because it didn't fill up with 5 people. It's still not really possible to sleep because you'll travel on highway for a little bit and then they'll turn onto a dirt road that's super bumpy. But it was like somewhat reasonable. Other than being like, you know, uncomfortable, bumpy, you kind of feel like you're going to die because you're in a bus in Southeast Asia. But then the second time we did it, we stayed on the top deck of these back 5 bunks. Amanda was on the window side in a seat right beside the window, and I was right beside her. And then after we started going, the bus stopped a few times, and the whole 5 seats filled up with Vietnamese guys right beside me. And it was pouring rain outside, so there's rain dripping in to the bus on Amanda's window side. So she was trying to like get over towards my seat. But the guy in the middle seat right beside me, this like kind of older Vietnamese dude, clearly very accustomed to sleeping on uncomfortable bus rides, just like passed out. His face is like right beside mine, kind of breathing on me. So I'm trying to like dig my way over into Amanda's seat.
I just remember being like, move over. And you're like, look at this dude. Like, I can't move over. Like, you need to move over. And I was like, it is wet on my left side. Like, I can't move over. And just like, both of us were so uncomfortable.
Yeah. I remember
I remember being grumpy. Like, I was just like, this sucks.
Yeah. And then it just goes on too for like 8 hours, and you like sleep for like 15 minutes at a time. And then you stop, and it's this like crazy roadside stop with like all sorts of weird stuff going on, and spiders and
yeah. And it's interesting because like all the buses have bathrooms on them, but they're all locked and not usable. So I don't really know what that's about, but I know for me, like it's bumpy. I'm trying not to drink like too much water because then I have to pee, and I don't want to like pee myself in this bus when we hit a massive bump. But then you stop in the middle of the night. They turn all the lights on the bus, like tell you you're at a rest stop, and you go out and go to the bathroom. And I mean, it's fine if you're a guy, but if you're a girl, like it is literally a hole in the ground. Like I became very proficient at the squat and it's like over top of this disgusting hole in the ground. I remember thinking, I actually still have these Birkenstocks, but I remember thinking like, I got to throw these sandals out because they have encountered so much gross terrain. It's kind of funny that I still have them, and now they've been through South America as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like 15-minute intervals of sleep, you kind of get to your next destination in the morning and you just feel just ruined, like hungover, tired, grumpy, completely out of it because you have barely slept.
Yeah. And I think that now if I was in those situations, I'd be much better at like accepting that I don't have control over this thing, and like being okay with the things I don't have control over, and like, you know, being calm and relaxed and just like generally more zen.
Yeah.
But at the time I was just like,
yeah, definitely. Me too. I mean, I'm a way more zen person in general now. So I think that I'd be way more comfortable with the entire situation. But yeah, I just remember like both of us so frustrated. Like that one bus ride was so bad. And I felt like, you know, bad for you because this Vietnamese dude is basically trying to spoon you, and then the like water's pouring in on my left, and it was just so uncomfortable. And I remember at points too, like I'd finally fall asleep on one of the straight sort of highway parts where we're, you know, kind of like comfortably moving along, and then I'd wake up. And I remember one time looking outside and just like the biggest potholes, and our bus is swaying back and forth, and it's like pouring rain. I was like, I'm going to die on this bus. Mm-hmm. Like my life is over. Like nobody knows where I am. Like my family's going to get this message. Like your daughter died in a bus crash, like somewhere in the middle of Vietnam. Just like, that's the end of my life. It's over.
Yeah. And you do feel kind of like claustrophobic up at the back because the roof's not, you know, you're kind of stuck in the back. There's a bunch of seats around you. Like if this bus did crash, how on earth would you get out of it?
Yeah. Yeah. I have no idea. So kind of going back, so like Moonay was this place where we rented sort of these like crappy little pedal bikes, and we took the bikes and we biked them to sort of like natural sand dune desert, I guess. And then you can pay like Vietnamese children or teenagers to kind of like send you sandboarding. So that was a bit of like a fun adventure for us.
Mm-hmm. And Moonay, we were there during rainy season, and Moonay is kind of this like beach town where I think they get like a lot of like Russian tourists or something. But it was just really dead when we were there.
Did you say Russian tourists?
Mm-hmm.
I do not remember that.
I think that it's like Vietnam's a reasonably popular destination for Russian people.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, no.
Communist thing.
Yeah, it was really quiet when we were there. But then our next stop, so we took the atrocious bus from Moonay to Nha Trang. And Nha Trang is a really popular beach place for backpackers. There's a ton of like bars there, some cool restaurants, lots of like big hostels. And that was a really nice place because, you know, like I said before, we met some friends in Ho Chi Minh City, which we actually met up with in Nha Trang. But for the most part, like, I don't know, we weren't meeting that many people in Asia. So it was like, you know, some people, I guess, think it's like cool when you're traveling like with a friend, you know, you don't really need other people, or especially with a partner maybe that you don't need, or you're not interested in meeting other people. But for us, like we'd been traveling for, you know, 4.5 months by this point. Like it's really awesome to have other people to hang out with and to talk to and to meet, because, conversation kind of dwindles when it's just the two of us, and we've spent the last 4 months consecutively together. So it was nice to get to Nha Trang, and like, it was the first place where we had like these outdoor hostel patios, and we were meeting so many cool people and had like groups of people to hang out with during the day.
Yeah. And one of the kind of like striking things about Nha Trang is when you get there at the hostel, they're like, oh, if you leave the hostel, don't take your wallet, don't take your phone, don't take your passport. Like, you will.
Don't take your camera.
You will get mugged. And that seems to be, if we walked out in packs for the entire time we were there, but one of the people we were staying with happened to get kicked out of a bar and was by himself. And like, sure enough, got kind of beat up and mugged and all this stuff taken except for his passport.
Yeah, his camera was stolen and that sort of thing. Yeah, it was kind of interesting. Like, we kind of traveled, as a pack, and he was in our pack originally when we went to the bar, and then I don't really know what happened. Like, a bunch of us left together, and I don't really know what happened, if he'd left before us or after.
He got kicked out of the bar we were at.
Okay, before we left?
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't know where he went, and we saw him the next day, just like so battered and bruised. So for anyone going to Nha Trang, definitely something to keep in mind. And I think too, it's interesting.
Side note, keep that in mind.
Yeah. If you're a solo traveler, I think like, the unfortunate thing is that you don't have sort of like that buddy with you who's like definitely got your back. Like if you got kicked out of the bar, I'd obviously be out there with you, or vice versa. Whereas like when you're kind of a solo person, like we're kind of like, oh, where'd Christian go? Like, oh, he's not here anymore. Like, okay, continue like dancing on the dance floor, getting some more drinks, and then leaving in like our pack,
Mm-hmm.
Like, you really do have to be safe if you're traveling by yourself, because you don't have necessarily that buddy who's like got your back.
Mm-hmm.
We debated doing our PADI certification in Nha Trang though, which was an interesting thing that you came across in your journal that I'd completely forgotten about. Do you remember why we decided not to? Was it our visa?
Yeah, I think just the timing didn't work out great, but I think that is, so obviously Thailand is a very popular place for people doing Southeast Asia trips to do their PADI certification, specifically Koh Tao. That's kind of like the scuba diving island.
Which is where we did ours. There's an episode on that too.
In Vietnam, Nha Trang is that place. And Nha Trang seems to be a popular backpacker party city. There's like a water park. People do booze cruises. We went on one of those. You can do scuba. So quite a few people hang out there for quite a while. And that was really the most like backpackery experience we got in Vietnam.
Yeah,
where
definitely.
We were, going out to the bar every night and hanging out with people.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of is just sort of like what we really just like beached it, booze cruise, went to bars. Like, it is really just a beach city, which is kind of fun after being in like Ho Chi Minh City and experiencing so much traffic and craziness. And from Nha Trang, we took a bus. We made a stop in Hoi An, and we just stayed there for one night, right?
I think so.
Yeah, and we had an interesting experience there because we were kind of like wandering around the city, and we ran into two guys who we'd seen them a couple times by this point, right?
I think so. I think maybe
Ho Chi Minh and Nha Trang. I think we'd ran into them, but they were taking motorbikes up the coast of Vietnam, and so it was kind of cool too.
Yeah, just hearing about their adventure was kind of like, I felt definitely like a little bit of envy.
I don't think I did. I feel like it's definitely like the male testosterone. Let's like rent a bike and drive up the coast. I'm like, buses are scary enough. I'm good. It was cool though to hear about like the difference in their experience versus ours. Like,
they would encounter challenges like bikes broken down, getting lost, driving on like big open empty highways that turn into like random dirt roads because the Vietnamese government does weird things like that.
Yeah, and thinking about how like our buses were going over these potholes, and thinking about driving these like little motorbikes over these like massive potholey roads. But it sounded like they were having a super cool adventure, and it was definitely neat to like run into them. if you're the super adventurous type up there, definitely something to consider for yourself is to rent a bike and drive up the coast. It's definitely an option. I don't know if you save money necessarily by doing it because buses are pretty affordable, but definitely have like some cool stories to tell from that, I think.
Yeah, and I think the experience when you are kind of in control like that, like you're planning your route, you're doing this, you're kind of responsible for solving your own problems and getting yourself into those problems in the first place. It can be like more fulfilling than just hopping on a bus.
Yeah, I think that's something we've talked about a lot in episodes from South America because we were a bit more like adventurous when we were in South America, whereas like in Southeast Asia, we did mostly sort of tours and took buses. And in South America, we often adventured kind of on our own to experience things. And it is like so fulfilling when you have a day where you've completely gotten yourself from one place to the next, or you've done something completely on your own. It feels like really good. It's like these small wins in these countries where you don't speak the language. Yeah. I think that having a Vietnamese cell phone or a cell phone plan wherever you're at, if you're going to do that, would be a huge plus, like getting a SIM card.
And probably a reasonable grasp of the language so that if you got, like, you had to find a repair shop and stuff like that.
Yeah. Even like buying gas. It's kind of interesting in Southeast Asia. I think we've talked about it in a few of the other episodes, but you buy gas from kind of these stands on the side of the road and they're in like bottles.
Well, that's not that was like specifically Cambodia and I think Vietnam as well.
Yeah. Probably not the case in Bangkok. But I think even there you can find that.
So Hoi An is kind of this like magical looking old city. It's really like the popular point of it, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because we traveled by overnight bus basically everywhere we went. And I feel like the more times we did that, like the more sort of disenchanted I became with Vietnam. Like we'd show up in this place, it was really cool, but I'd be so like tired and kind of grumpy from the bus ride the night before that I feel like my appreciation for the places kind of like went down the longer we traveled in Vietnam. Like I think the overnight buses were really wearing on me and I'd kind of like get somewhere and I just want to check into our place. I'd want to sleep. I wanted to eat. Like I feel like I was getting kind of like when I remember my experiences from Vietnam, I remember like Ho Chi Minh City being this like amazing place that I was so excited about. And the further up the coast we got, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that's kind of stuck with me afterwards too, because we meet a lot of people who have been to Vietnam, and almost exclusively everyone's like, I love Vietnam. And I was kind of like, I kind of left being like, good riddance when we got out of there. But I think it was having this kind of like tight timeline, and we were kind of like, we're like, okay, we're going to go here, out. And it's going to be like right to 15 days and we didn't have everything planned, but we kind of had it blocked out, and we weren't sleeping well because of these long trips. You're on tours. We were on tours a lot of the time, and that is kind of frustrating when you're on a tour in a place like Vietnam, or it can be frustrating.
Yeah.
And I think that at the time, I was definitely more prone to frustration than just kind of like acceptance and gratitude and appreciation.
Yeah, definitely. Like when I think back about my experiences in Vietnam, I think that there was like a lot of really cool things. Like even thinking about how, you describe Hoi An as this like magical city. And it definitely was like so much cool architecture and old buildings and just like a lot of interesting stuff, great restaurants, so much good food in Vietnam. But I feel like I kind of had this like black cloud sort of hanging over my head for a lot of Vietnam. And I just think about it kind of growing in size, like the further north we got. Like I remember being really happy to leave Vietnam, like kind of like, okay, sweet. Like we're done with that part of this adventure. Like I'm good without that again. Yeah. But talking about it now makes me kind of want to go back and eat more pho.
So our last destination in Vietnam was Hanoi, the capital city.
Yeah, and Hanoi is kind of famous because it's the gateway to Halong Bay, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Center. I feel like it's been filmed in a lot of movies. It's a pretty pretty incredible location. And once again, you know, I was so exhausted by Vietnam. I feel like I didn't really appreciate Halong Bay.
Yeah, we were watching episode 3 of Star Wars the other day, and you know, there's a scene where they go to the Wookiee planet, and you're like, oh wow, that's Halong Bay. It's cool that we've been there.
Yeah, definitely. And it is really beautiful. Like Halong Bay is famous because it's this bay, obviously, but it's got all these sort of like islands, and they're covered in a lot of like greenery. So it's kind of like these rocks sticking out of the water, covered in really green plants because it's so hot and humid and moist there. And it is really spectacular scenery. Like looking back on photos, I'm like, wow, that was really beautiful. And I don't think I appreciated it as much as.
Yeah, it was another situation where we'd heard a lot about these boat tours. Like there's one specific hostel in Hanoi, and you book your boat tour there. You get to go on this like really fun boat trip. There'll be like a lot of other people. It's a big boat. There'll be like some fun, like, you know, you'll have like fun interactions and party and do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And we signed up for a tour, and then kind of the entire time, it didn't meet expectations. Like things you thought you were getting, you didn't get.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to think back to that and just like the difference in how I am now, because the boat tour we did is like exactly how I'd want to do Halong Bay. Like I think we were in a group of like 8 people. Everyone was pretty chill. Like, you know, just had like, you know, tea or beers at night, and everyone went to bed early and really like wanted to take in the sights. Whereas I think at that point we really wanted to go on kind of more of like a party trip. Like we'd heard that there was these really fun boats and you could meet tons of people, and that's what we had wanted to sign up for. And that's not the tour that we were put on. So I think that I remember feeling kind of disappointed with the tour, like the whole first day basically being like convincing myself that it would be okay.
Yeah, and then on the way out, the tour guide kind of just like left us and was like, okay, since you guys are doing the shorter tour, some other tour guide will come like pick you up here, and then took forever. And then on the way back, we had to like wait around for a long time, and this other tour guide didn't really care about us because he wasn't our tour guide. So I think that, yeah, this kind of like nagging frustration, because instead of just like accepting reality and how things were, just kind of constantly comparing it to like, we're being wronged or something like that.
Yeah. And it's kind of an interesting thing to think about that was sort of our mindset at that time. I feel like I've grown as a traveler and a person in so many ways since that point in time, which would make sense because it was like, you know, 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago. No, like more like 4.5. But I think that it's a big thing that you learn as a person, as a traveler, when you travel somewhere that's more developing or where the culture is very different from your own. You know, the quality of service is different. The quality of tours is different. Patience is huge. I was not a patient person at the ripe age of 22. And I was just remember like so much frustration and so much like, ugh, why are these people treating us like this? And I think that that's something that I really learned, and that, you know, getting to South America and having that happen was kind of like, okay, like it's just how it's going to be. And I can either sit here and I can stew about it and I can feel upset, or I can just like embrace that this is the experience I'm having and like let it go, because I can't control it.
Yeah. That's definitely a good life lesson that I think traveling has helped both of us learn, just kind of accepting the way things are and accepting what you can't change and then trying to change what you can. So knowing that tours in countries like that are going to be kind of usually over-promise and under-deliver. And then so if you can avoid them doing that, or just dropping your expectations dramatically, and then they'll be over-delivering.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's, you know, it's something that Rory and I talked about in a couple episodes ago when I interviewed him. He's been traveling for, I mean, almost a year now, but 10 months at the time of us talking. And he said that's the biggest thing for him is expectations. Really, you need to let them go. Like you really do. Expectations can ruin, like literally ruin your time somewhere.
Yeah, but you can't let go of expectations.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe lower expectations. Go in with very low expectations, and then maybe you'll be like pleasantly surprised.
Being aware of them.
Yeah.
Like if you stop for a moment and you're like, oh, okay, what am I... like if you feel something, if you feel frustration, then you stop and you're like, okay, clearly something about what's happening is like I'm frustrated because my expectation for something isn't matching the reality of something. And so you can't change your reality as much as you can change your expectations. So if you just like, okay, these expectations are ridiculous, I just got to match them with reality, and then I'll feel content.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good point. And that's, that makes me think about our experience in Halong Bay. Had I sat down and been like, okay, why do I feel frustrated right now? Okay, because I expected X, Y, Z, and this tour is providing me A, B, C instead. And had I, just been like, okay, well, for the rest of the tour, this is what I'm going to expect, or I'm going to bring my expectations down to here, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more, because there was actually nothing wrong with our tour. It was just different than what I had wanted.
So what do you think like the biggest travel lessons you took out of 15 days in Vietnam were?
I think having expectations is definitely a big one, since we're talking about that.
Having realistic expectations?
Yeah. So, going somewhere, and I think expectations in general can be really, really harmful, and it's really good to like be aware of expectations and then lower expectations as well. Patience. I was just so impatient constantly there. And it was the first time where I really recognized, I think, that I needed to let go of this idea that I had to have everything in control. Like little things would frustrate me so much, like getting on a bus and there being a bathroom, and then the bathroom being like locked and not working was so irritating to me. Instead of just being like, okay, well, it is what it is. Like, I'll go to the bathroom at the crappy rest stop that we're going to stop at. Like, it'll be fine. Which is kind of the stance I took in South America. It was like this thing that I would kind of like let stew inside of me and like really irritate me.
And you kind of like take it personal.
Yeah, like almost like it was a personal attack. Like the bus driver had been like, you have to pee, I'm going to lock this bathroom door on you, which is like not how it is at all. So I think that one was a big one for me as well. What about you?
I think that having more flexibility and freedom, and being a bit more better at scheduling time for flexibility. Like, I think we kind of took on too much.
Yeah.
And that going from place to place to place and trying to cram that much stuff into that few days kind of meant that we got less of experience along the way.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's one thing that we've kind of continued to learn and even we talk about it a lot in South America, how we weren't like extremely prepared for Patagonia, but we went down there and it was still good. I'm still really happy we went. But same thing in Southeast Asia too. It's like more of a time crunch and we're like, we got to go everywhere.
Yeah.
And just really, you don't have to go everywhere. You go back. You can not go somewhere. It doesn't really matter. And all of it doesn't really matter. So, yeah, that would probably be the big thing for me.
Yeah. So do you think, I know like, so we've talked about our dislike for Vietnam with like multiple other people before. And I feel like doing this episode has made me kind of reflect on it and be like, oh, Vietnam was actually not bad. It was kind of more my mindset and that sort of thing. And it kind of makes me intrigued to go back there and sort of like revisit that and see if I could have a different experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think that as we've traveled more, I've kind of learned that like these objectively better destinations don't really exist.
Yeah.
Someone else like it's kind of funny because like people doing a travel podcast, but like other people's opinions and experiences matter, but they're not really that important. Like your mindset is going to be more important on the quality of your experience than like if someone's like, where should I go in Southeast Asia? And we're like, oh, don't, go to Thailand. That's better than Vietnam. Well, it's not if you get, I don't know, mugged. If you chose to go to Vietnam and you have like this awesome motorbike experience or something. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's a really good point. I think it's really important to decide what is right for you and what you want to do and, take other people's lessons and learnings and, discover your own experiences from them, I think. But anyways, do you have anything else about Vietnam that you want to talk about?
So the last thing, we took a flight from Hanoi out to
Luang Prabang.
Yeah, in Laos.
Laos.
And at the airport, as we were leaving, kind of got a little bit like extra scrutiny from like exit immigration from my passport being my passport photo was when I had been like a bit chubbier. So they were like,
yeah, you'd lost like, I don't know, like 30 pounds or something. It was fairly significant.
So I remember that being kind of like maybe not startling, but like an interesting experience, because I think we had an experience with exit immigration in
Thailand and Cambodia.
But it was very like light. And the idea of exit immigration, which was kind of foreign to me being Canadian, it's kind of like scary to think that you're going to be like inspected on your way out of the country. And like, they're like, oh yeah, no, it's not like going to a new country and they're like, oh, we're not going to let you in. It's like, oh, we're not going to let you leave. That's like a very scary prospect.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting too, because, you know, as we talked about before, my passport had been water damaged slightly. And so I was feeling a bit nervous to try and leave with this like slightly damp passport that has a bit of like a runny visa in it. Like the ink on the visa had run a little bit. And then we get there and like they did take a little bit of time to look at mine, but it was really yours. Like they took yours in the back room and we kind of had this moment of like, we're separated. Like we don't get to go up to the border counter together. So it's not even like we can talk about this, but we kind of have this moment of like exchanging glances where it's like, what's going on? Like, what are they doing with your passport? Because, you know, there's some corruption in the government and people higher up there. Like, are they photocopying it? Are they taking your information so that they can like resell it? Like, what are they doing with it in the back? Like, are you not going to be let through? Because it's like a legitimate thing. Like they can choose not to let you out and they've got a lot of power there.
Yeah. So, and I remember, so in the entire time we're in Vietnam, whenever you check into a new hostel, they take your passport.
Oh yeah, and they lock it up in a safe, which is a little bit like...
And I think they must, like the police in the town must like keep a log of what tourists are there or something like that. But the entire time, yeah, that's really the first place we went where you could really feel this kind of like state in like it's a different way to how it is. Like you could really feel that you're significantly less free there, where they're trying to censor what you're doing on the internet, where your tourist experiences are pretty heavily propagandized, where you have to check in with your passport, where you have to go through exit immigration. So yeah, it was, I think, a good learning experience.
Yeah, it definitely gives you a different perspective on, you know, how other people live in the world.
Yeah, and just how things can turn.
Sleep with one eye open. You never know. I'm kidding about that one. So check out the show notes, www.theworldwanders.com. If you want to get in touch with us, if you have questions, comments, feedback, or you just want to say hi, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at info@theworldwanders.com, or you can check us out on the contact page on the website. Also, we have a really cool ebook coming your way pretty quick here. So sign up for our newsletter on theworldwanders.com and we'll send you a free copy of that once it's out. So get on the mailing list before it comes out so that we've got your email and we can send it to you. It's going to be a pretty fun little thing that we're doing. So we're super excited about it. If you like the podcast, which we hope you do, if you're listening to it, join the community on Facebook or Twitter. It's The World Wanders. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
Thank you.